It's a real pleasure for me to be back at this annual event of the National School Choice Conference. This is a topic that I have engaged with and championed over more than 2 decades. As I begin, I would like to put in context this topic of the transformation of education in Bharat, which has happened in recent years, and the work still left, the transformation that is still required, the road ahead, about which Amit ji spoke so eloquently and with so compellingly. The context I want to put is about this renaissance of India that is taking place as a whole, not just about education. Now, for millennia, we were the place where people from all over the world used to come to, whether it was for learning, whether it was for earning, whether it was for fame and fortune, whether it was for spirituality. India was the lodestar which attracted the best minds, the seekers, all over. When I was listening to my old friend Gurcharan Das talk about transforming from rote learning to an inquiring mind, that's what we used to have. The development of science that happened a couple of millennia ago in this land of ours didn't happen through rote learning. It happened through people who had inquiring minds, who questioned the status quo, who questioned the norms, whether it was about astronomy or medicine, whether it was many, many different subjects. The economic transformation that has gone on is very dramatic. It's there for everyone to see. Now, in terms of the per capita income that Amit ji referred to, that we have reached $2,200, and that makes us a lower middle income country. I'll talk about the window of opportunity that we have that he referred to, but keep in mind, $2,200, when I was born, it was $100. By the time I got out of school, it was $200. As recently as the turn of the century, in the year 2000, it was little more than $400. And only 10 years ago, a decade ago, it was $1,600. Today we have come to $2,200. Now, we have this demographic advantage. The demographic advantage that we have is celebrated and talked about the world over. You're right, it's not always going to remain the same. Nations, their populations, their demographics, they wax and wane, just like economies do. There was a time when India was, along with China, the 2 largest economies in the world. As recently as 300 years ago, we both accounted for 50% of the global economy. But we then got left behind. And we have started turning this around and recently picking up pace very rapidly. Cracking into the top 10 economies only within the last decade. Going past our former colonial master, Britain, to number 5 only 3-4 years ago. Now, in number 4 position, headed towards the 3rd largest economy in just 2 years away or 3 years at the most. Now, none of this is guaranteed. We can't get caught up in the hubris that our economic revival, our education revival will happen on autopilot. We all have tough choices to make. And those tough choices, many of them are being made, and many required to be made, as has been pointed out. Now, I'll come to the NEP in a bit, but the issue of standards, outcomes, choices is not an Indian issue, as was mentioned just a little bit earlier. It's a global issue. Now, if you look, many people would consider that for more than a century, the economic superpower of the world, the military superpower of the world, the most powerful nation on earth has been the United States. And they've had a steady decline of educational standards. If you just look at even just the last 10 years, in the last 20 years, they have a steep decline in the number of students who, even though they have graduated school, are not able to do mathematics or simple language comprehension at the level of class 4 or class 6. Now, there are many reasons. They have become this vast bureaucracy where the teachers' unions decide the policies, where parents' role has steadily declined, where even though they have been trying for choice in the policy-making environment, the idea of vouchers is not a new idea. It has been tried, and wherever it has been tried, it has had quite stark successes. And yet there are tremendous resistance to it. If you look at New York, for instance, the movement towards having charter schools, which are public schools but much more focused on outcomes, who have had tremendous results, and yet they have tremendous bottlenecks and hurdles and resistance and opposition. So that brings us to what we have seen in India. So we have seen systems that have been placed for almost 80 years. They have been based on a legacy of 150 years. And one of the outcomes of that was the heavy focus on higher education rather than focusing on the bottom of the pyramid. Yes, that has led to some benefits. The IITs, the IIMs have contributed to India's tech resurgence. But the large gap that was left behind at the bottom of the pyramid, I was very intrigued to learn, is something that China is grappling with today. Now, China is not a democracy, and so they didn't have any populism. They could take decisions as deemed fit by the top 9 people who run the country. Actually, 2 or 3 people run the country out of those 9. So if you read the current issue of The Economist magazine, you'll find that China has a problem that we have been familiar with since the 1960s and 70s. The current Chinese problem is lots of university graduates, not enough jobs. And they are tremendously realizing the need to refocus on vocational education, jobs that, teaching that will lead to jobs that can have earning. This is something we have recognized much earlier, and we have been trying to course correct. We have had some successes, and we have a road ahead that we need to traverse. Now, but this conference here is not about vocational education. I was explaining all this to put into context our own historical situation and the current situation by large and small countries all across the world. Now, as we go forward economically, these demographic issues will matter because we have to keep on increasing productivity. And that productivity increase does not happen automatically. It happens with policy choices. It happens with having the right educated workforce. Today, if you talk to corporate CEOs, for many years now, you'll hear a common thread that there are billions of people available in the workforce, but when they look for the talent that they need for the positions that they have, they struggle. There is extreme competitiveness. Now, this brings me to the focus of this conference. All of you are aware about the issue of choice, and as Gurcharan Das mentioned, it has been a well understood phenomenon for many years now that even poor parents have been willing to pay out of pocket to put their wards into very ill-equipped English medium schools in rural areas, urban areas, rather than put them into government schools, which increasingly have very good facilities. Over the last, since the turn of the century, government schools have started getting the infrastructure that they lacked. I remember when I first became an MP in rural Odisha, I used to see a lot of government schools where the classrooms weren't there, students used to be sitting under trees. That has all changed. I don't see that anymore. But the software of teaching, the systems, the procedures, the processes, the measurement of the outcomes, although they have improved, it is a work in progress. Now, I'll come to choice in a bit again, because this is the recurring theme I want to touch upon. The NEP has indeed started making rather dramatic contributions to change in our education system. Let's look at, for example, computers in classrooms, in schools. So only 5 or 6 years ago, we barely had a little more than 1/3 of schools that had computers. 38% in 2019-20. And last year, 2024-25, it has gone up to 2/3 of schools have computers. 65%. Again, I want to reiterate, this is not the be-all or the end-all. Having computers in school is not the outcome that we want. It is a means. It is a stepping stone. It is a basic fundamental building block so that children in any kind of school should have access to computers, should have access to learning in a variety of different ways. So we should understand that this is necessary but not sufficient. So what do we need to do? Some of this has been mentioned. So the focus on inquiry-based learning that Gurcharan Das referred to in his opening talk. This Jadui Pitara scheme, play-based learning, is what fires the imaginations of young children. That is only just a few years old now. You have to give it a generation to see the effects. So 10, 15, 20 years down the road, we will see the true effects. Undoubtedly, it will have a good effect. But how efficiently it is implemented, how many children it covers, becomes a critical part of the outcomes that we are all looking for. Play itself, not just play-based learning, play itself is something that got de-emphasized. And over the years, over the decades, we have seen the transformation of schools into those having not enough facilities, no school, no play yard, no sports facilities, as if that was not important. The reality is that is a critical part of growing up. It is a critical part of development. And as we know now, play-based learning has a critical role in developing that critical thinking abilities to have an inquiring mind and not just to have rote-based learning. The decentralization that is happening because of NEP. For example, the state-based boards that Amitji was referring to, that will focus on outcomes-based regulation, is very important, because for such a vast and diverse country, it is never going to be possible that the Mandarin sitting in Delhi will be able to do that for all across the country. Now, as I come to the final portion of what I have to say, I want to return to the theme of choice. Everywhere in the world, including cities like New York, to which I referred a little bit earlier, it is becoming recognized that this distancing of the role of parents in education has been a very big contributor to the lowering of standards, to the lowering of outcomes, and to the bureaucratization of the system, which is impersonal and which has led to this dramatic drop in learning that is documented for students. So the role of parents is very, very important. And the parents have been voting with their feet when they have been choosing to go to ill-equipped schools, which are run by NGOs or which are run by private entrepreneurs, because even in ill-equipped schools, the outcomes, the learning is demonstrably better than many well-equipped government schools. That has been the norm for the last many years, many decades. But that is changing. As I said, not only are the infrastructure and the facilities at government schools changing, not only is the software changing, not only is the regulatory environment changing, which is focusing on outcomes, not just on regulating for the sake of regulations. And one of the biggest aspects of this choice is it has often been misconstrued that private schools are for the elite. Of course, that has been the legacy in the past, not just in India. You look at Europe, you look at our former colonial rulers, all the famous schools are all private boarding schools. You look at India, it is elite. That was the concept. But the concept of budget private schools is something. Now here, I'm not an expert, so maybe in your deliberations during the day, you can dwell more on this. I have a sense that India is actually the pioneer in this. I have a sense that because of the constraints of the system that we have just been talking about, it is in India that it got pioneered, that you had the elite private schools always, all over the world. But the budget private schools, which in many instances have given much better results than well-equipped schools, I think now, of course, it's happening in other parts of the world as well. But I think India is a pioneer and also possibly, I may be wrong in this, you are the experts, possibly the largest marketplace for such institutions. We should not resist this. We should harness it. I have said this before in earlier edition of this very conference. And my friend and colleague Ashish Sood ji is here, minister in the Delhi government. I know the government in Delhi now is trying to bring about many changes in health sector, in infrastructure, and in education. It will be very important because Delhi is the showcase of the nation. This is where the entire foreign press, the diplomatic corps, anybody that observes India focuses on looking at Delhi first. But this is a matter for the entire country. How do we harness the energies and the efficiencies of budget private schools which have demonstrated their ability? How do we use the concepts of vouchers, perhaps? I'm saying perhaps because it is a matter of debate. It's not universally accepted around the world. I happen to believe that vouchers are a good idea. But it is a concept that has had a lot of resistance around the world, including in India. I believe we should be using vouchers. And I believe more than vouchers now, because of technology and because of vast success in India on DBT, direct benefits transfer, a lot of facilities are happening that are changing the mold in which we had been stuck for many decades. So let me use an analogy with the farming sector. For decades, India has turned from being a hungry nation in 60 years ago to a grain surplus nation. We have had the opposite problem of millions of tons of grain storage problem. So India runs the world's largest food aid program, where more than 800 million people are benefited. But in order to change the incentive structure, within the last decade, this government has come out with DBT for farmers. And that DBT gives them the choice. Earlier, they were structured into this systemic incentive that you grow grains, you get MSP. So to the detriment of the nation of not growing the required quantum of vegetables, fruits, and other things. Now, pulses. So farmers are making that choice Because instead of just getting MSP support, if they have the option, 6,000 rupees a year which they are getting, they are making choices to grow, not grains, but other things, higher value, more earning for themselves. Same concept applies to education. Same concept applies to many other sectors. So whether it is vouchers, whether it is DBT, whether other means of policy choices which can provide a level playing field for parents to choose, so that rather than give up the midday meal, rather than give up the free education, rather than give up the well-equipped school which does not give the correct outcomes or good enough outcome, and pay out of pocket to get a better educational outcome, they should be able to make that choice the level playing field. If they have DBT and they have a choice, sure, whichever schools are performing well, government, private, budget, not budget, should be the parent's choice to take advantage of whichever system is giving the best result for their children. Choice is a very important part, because that depersonalized, large, bureaucratic regulatory system where parents are distanced has been demonstrably proved to be a failure all across the country, all across the world. And so the more we can build choice into the structure, apart from the budgetary support, which is increasing dramatically for many sectors where, as I've mentioned, the facts prove for themselves that schools are getting better. Government schools are getting better. Private schools are getting more competitive. But it is the outcomes that we need to focus on. And with the focus on moving away from rote learning, moving into inquiry-based learning, play-based learning, providing the opportunities to children of any economic background to have the same level playing field. I'll just end with two examples. The budgetary support that goes to schools to take in EWS students is a very, very good example of this. I talked about DBT. I had the privilege a few years ago to chair a high-level committee for the reformation of the NCC, the National Cadet Corps, the world's largest such organization. And one of the big problems was, you can imagine, uniforms. If you talk about uniforms for children, and you're talking about millions and millions of children, the logistical problems, how to build efficiency into it, one of the simple solutions we suggested was do DBT. And it's already being done by the government. So if DBT can be done in NCC, it is something that can be considered in schools, private or public. These are the kind of policy changes which gives the incentives to parents and levels the playing field so that they can get to make the choices. I wish you all the best in deliberating on these issues during the course of this conference. You all are stakeholders that play a very important role in this transformation. And I know the challenges that you face, the window of opportunity that we have. Demographically, we have time. We have a generation to fix these things. But we can't, just because we have a generation to fix these things, we can't do tomorrow what we need to do today. And we can't do next week what we need to do this week. So some of these tough choices will have to be made. The track record is that they are being made. And I'm cautiously optimistic that many, if not most, of the changes that are required will happen gradually, and that we will see the outcomes that we are looking for. There are many other challenges. There is not enough scope at this point to talk about them at length, but I wish you all to have a very, very fruitful and productive conference. Thank you very much. Jai Bharat, Jai Hind.